And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, I'm going to be talking about flight risks. Flight risks. My bad. Or, for those of you guys who don't understand that term, flight risks, they're essentially like people who are in danger of leaving their team. So it's like, flight risks are players who are at the risk of potentially playing for a different team in next season. And we have a lot of free agents coming up for this next free agency class. I mean, we have LeBron, we have Jimmy Butler, there's Brandon Ingram, Jamal Murray, Julius Randle. They're all going to be free agents next season. Who else is going to be a free agent? Some role players. There's Sengun, Kuminga, Jalen Green, I believe, and I'm missing a couple, and Jalen Johnson as well. I believe those are some players that are also on the free agency market, and a lot of them, and there are going to be some players, actually a lot of the players in the free agency market that are almost most definitely going to sign with the same team. Like LeBron is most definitely going to sign with the Lakers now that they drafted his son. And, Jamal Murray, he's obviously going to go back to Denver because, he is a very important piece to that team, and they're not going to get rid of him. They didn't get rid of him when he got that season-ending injury, so they're not going to get rid of him now. And on top of that, there's also, who else did I mention? Oh, and Sengun, he's not going to be a part of, he is going to be a part of the Houston Rockets for next season, where it's like, he's arguably going to be the number one option for Houston. So he's most definitely going to return to Houston. But it's the other players that are a little bit unlikely, and we're not entirely sure on where they're going to land. So I'm just going to give a list of some of the players who, in my opinion, could be at a risk of leaving the team, and whether it be for seeking more money, whether it be because they're unhappy in the situation that they're in, or whether it be because of existential crisis or something. I don't know. Whatever reason it could be, I'm going to lay all of that down. So first player that I'm going to be talking about is Caris LeVert. Now, he's been one of the better six men of the NBA. He's averaged 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists in the 2022 season. So, just pointing that out so that way you guys know. And in the ideal world, LeVert and the Cavs would have an interest in a new contract. With the second apron luxury tax concerns, however, coming up for Cleveland in next season, they might not be able to afford him. That second apron luxury tax hits people hard. And a lot of owners are going to be a little bit more hesitant now to wanting to, spend that much money on these types of players. And with Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell both agreeing to max extensions for the Cavs this previous summer, the Cavs, they already have $180 million on payroll for the 2025 and 2026 season, and over $20 million more than the current roster is making. So it's not looking good. That's a big problem for that sounds like a big problem for Cleveland. If they can't get their finances straight, or if somebody can't take a pay cut, then the team, or Caris LeVert, might not be around for much longer. He's expiring on a $16.6 million contract, and I don't know how much he would really, they'd be able to sign for. The Cavs, they're projected to be just $26.9 million below the second apron, with 9 players on the roster. And a new contract for Okoro is probably going to be $10 million, with roughly $17 million left to sign for extra players. Which begs the question, where does Caris LeVert fit in all that? Not entirely sure. So they might have to give up on him. But that's one of the players. Next player on this list is Dennis Schroeder for the Brooklyn Nets. Now, Dennis Schroeder, he's on a team that's essentially going to be bad on purpose. He's going from being the savior for Germany, his Superman role that he has on Germany, to now being on a team that is going to most likely be winless for a majority of the season. And Schroeder is also on his final year of his contract where he's making $13 million, and he could have made so much more money than that, but he opted to wait for, I guess, another contract or something aside from the Lakers, and that ultimately didn't end up panning out nearly as well as that he thought. Like, it was really bad. He could have made around I want to say maybe in the 40 millions or something like that. And now he's only making the 13 millions, which is a huge loss. Like, he is most definitely kicking himself after that. I forget the exact details on it. I'll pull them up eventually, but I forget exactly what the details of that were. But he's 30 years old, and he averaged 14 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists, and shot 41% from 3 in the 29 games from after being traded. So even if Schroeder makes it past the trade deadline, there's little reason to believe that he's a long-term option in Brooklyn. And the Nets are definitely, the Nets would save significant cap space next to the summer if they just decide to let Dennis Schroeder go. And not to mention the expiring contracts from Ben Simmons, Bogdanovich, and Zaire Williams as well to pair up with that as well. So the team is committed to rebuilding as well. So with Dennis Schroeder at the point guard and him most likely being in a win-now mentality, I don't think Brooklyn is the best fit for him. So I think he's going to want to get traded, or not get traded, excuse me. I think he's going to want to sign for a different team and possibly look to sort of benefit that team into winning a title. I think he wants to be a contributor for a title contending team, maybe as a sixth man or something like that. But I don't think Brooklyn is going to be his role. I don't think that's the best role for him. Now, next on the list is Clint. I don't know why I was pausing there for so long, but aside from that, next player on the list, Clint Capella for the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the biggest reason why I think he's probably going to seek another option is because his time with Atlanta has not really worked. He spent a lot of his time on Atlanta. Not a lot of his time, but he spent some time on Atlanta after his time with Houston, right? He made it to the conference finals, but after that, the Hawks have really not been able to get anything going with him. And on top of the fact that the Hawks recently just drafted a center at the number 1 pick, and center, power forward, whatever you want to call them, that's it's questioning exactly what Clint Capella's long-term role for the team here really is. And so I think he's going to look for another option just off of the fact that they drafted another center in the hopes that he is going to be the better center for the team and maybe even lead the team. So he's also on an expiring $22.3 million contract after averaging 11, 10, and 1.5 blocks per game while shooting 57% from the field last season. So I think he's probably going to be getting a starting job somewhere else, and maybe for a little bit more money. That's my thought process, mainly because I don't think he'd want to spend time trying to be alongside a center if he's ultimately going to get replaced at a time where he should probably be chasing for rings. Now, again, that's just my opinion, but we can, all of us can agree to disagree on that one, honestly. Now, next player on this list is by far probably the most likely, arguably the most likely player to not be on the team he was close to number 1. He was very close to number 1, but I decided not to do that. And it's D'Angelo Russell. Now, obviously, we all know exactly why he's not going to be a Laker after this season. It's because of his horrible, terrible, despicable, criminal performance in the postseason. It was bad. It was atrocious. It was disgusting. It was at the most unexpected time you could possibly ask for. D'Angelo Russell was coming off of a streak where he was dropping 25, 26, 30, 32, 22 in every single night. He would drop close to those numbers. But once the postseason came around, it all ended right there. All of that was done once the postseason came around. And it didn't, not even a second, and it was done. And it was the exact same story that happened the season before last season, where in 2022, the Lakers got swept by Denver mainly because of D'Angelo Russell's lack of play. And here we go again. The Lakers almost get swept by Denver mainly because of D'Angelo Russell's lack of play. And what makes this recent loss even worse is that the Lakers were in position to win in every single one of the games that they were playing in. It's just they were just one or two plays off of winning the game in the end. And the biggest reason why was because of D'Lo's production. And a lot of Laker fans and a lot of people don't want him on LA anymore. And coincidentally, I don't think D'Lo wants to be a part of that anymore either. Just going off of his attitude, being on the bench and playing the way that he was playing. So I also think that the only reason why he even picked up his player option is because that no team was really interested in getting him on their team in this season, with the amount of contract on his $18.7 million player option. I don't think teams were willing to pay more for that after the recent postseason struggles. So I think that was the reason why he ultimately decided to pick up his player option, because he wanted to end up, being on a team and making a lot of money while being on the team. So I think that in my opinion is the biggest reason why he even took the player option for the previous season. And let me know in the comments what you guys think of that. Do you guys think that he took the player option because he genuinely wanted to be on LA? Or do you guys think he took the player option because he had no other choice? And, excuse me, the final player on this list, and most likely going to be the player that's not going to be playing for their team next season, is Brandon Ingram. Again, this was really close between D'Angelo Russell and, him, but I ultimately decided to go with Brandon Ingram. And after what seemed like months of trade speculation for Brandon Ingram, it now appears that Brandon Ingram actually is going to stay with New Orleans for this season. But once they get over that luxury tax, I think that's ultimately when they're going to decide to part ways. They're already over that luxury tax line. And they still don't have a starting caliber center on the roster. And they're going to have to move on from somebody. Moving Ingram for one while trimming $1.7 million off the payroll remains the best path forward for the franchise, especially when factoring in future contract trepidations and things like that. So being able to move on from a player like Ingram is probably going to be the best step that the Pelicans can take. And in my opinion, I think they should also move on from McCollum now if the goal is to try and get a starting center that is a competent starting center, I should say, that should be able to pair alongside with Zion equally well. And that's the reason why I think you should also give up CJ for that, is because it's not really easy to find a center that can fit in that kind of system. If you were to find any kind of center that would fit in that, I would imagine it would be like Karl Anthony Towns. In fact, if there was any kind of trade that I think that the Pelicans should probably try to get with, it should be a trade between Minnesota that would send Brandon Ingram over there in exchange for Karl Anthony Towns or whatever kind of pieces they need to grab or they need to get rid of in order to avoid that luxury tax and all NBA rules and things like that. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of that trade. That possibility of a trade, because obviously, this is just a spitball that I just came up with out of nowhere, which honestly could work now that I think about it. But at the same time, Minnesota seems to be working pretty well right now, so I don't know if they're really going to be as interested in trying to trade one of their, arguably their top two, not even their top two, arguably their top 2 best player in franchise history, and they wouldn't want to trade that away. I mean, and that's no exaggeration. Karl Anthony Towns is like, I believe he's the second leading scorer in entire Timberwolves franchise history. So, and not only that, he's also the best shooting big man in NBA history. So I think, being in the conversation for a top 2 franchise player ever is in the running. And again, it doesn't really take that much to be a top 2 player for the Timberwolves. Unfortunate as it is. I'm sorry for you, Timberwolves. Unfortunate as it is. But anyways, we are out of time for this 3rd segment. So now we will go ahead and go into this 4th segment where I bring up a tweet from your one and only Evan Fournier, everyone's favorite Frenchman. Or unless you're a Spurs fan, because, your favorite Frenchman is probably like either Victor Wembanyama or Tony Parker, something like that. I don't know. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and go into the 4th segment where I talk about a tweet from Fournier about James Harden being ranked over D. Wade. So for any of you guys interested in that, be sure to tune in right after this short break. I will be right back with you guys.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.